use this title to help a lot of young people understand that we don't lack power, we lack the ability to use the power for good. So a lot of when it comes to youth engagement, sometimes I do have an issue on how young people are definitely treated in India, because like we're always told you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the expertise, you don't have the experience to be able to contribute to creating solutions for climate change. Please never ever be bogged down by it, and that is why I always speak about the future of climate in India that is powered by young people, because we are the future, and we are the people who are actually more capable than most as young people to be able to come up with creative solutions for the crisis we are facing, because we can't solve the crisis that we are currently in with the same way of thinking that existed in the past. It's the way of thinking that existed in the past that brought us to the crisis, right? So we need people to think creatively, think about solutions that are outside the box and not trained certain way. And young people have a huge role to play in terms of helping us become more resilient, adapt to the climate crisis that we're facing. So that is why I always look at the future of climate in India being powered by young people itself. Okay, so before I go on to what you can do, I just want to give you all some context of, what COPs are, and like what are these international conferences and what really happens there. So most might have heard of UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This basically this was like, it's an international policy document exclusively look at climate change issues, but at an international level. At level, we have something called the National Action Plan on Climate Change. It's a policy document that we look at on how India decides to respond to climate change, and other documents that are under this. I'll just come to it a little bit later. But UNFCCC, the document was drafted by a lot of countries coming together in 1992, where the Rio conference happened. So if you look at the evolution of international environmental policies, Rio conference stands out because a lot of agreement, at the conference, representatives of so many countries basically come together, have discussions on what the policy should look like. And along with climate change, we also had the biodiversity a policy document that was created, and one on desertification. So they're both like UNFCCC, they're called CBD and UNCCD, Convention on Biological Diversity and Convention on Combating Desertification itself. So they're all called sister conventions. So these were important issues that governments thought that, we should all tackle together as the planet as a whole. So we should all come together, irrespective of us being individual countries, and tackle these issues. So UNFCCC is dedicated to climate change. But then this is called a party-driven process, which means countries basically sign up to work on climate change through this convention. And right now we have 198 parties to this convention. This is basically a near universal, it's 197 now, with US leaving the convention after Trump administration. So what they decided when they came up with the policy document is that they decided we will meet every year to discuss what is the progress we have made individually and internationally in tackling the climate crisis, because the goal of handling climate change is not just for the present generations but also for the future generations, right? So that is why our role as young people becomes very, very important, because whatever decisions are being taken up right now have implications far long into the future. So all countries come together every year of COPs happening. Last year it happened in Brazil. Before that it happened in Azerbaijan. Then before that in Dubai when I was the focal point. So when I started, it happened in Scotland. So there are like 5 regions. It keeps rotating across regions. Again, we keep evaluating processes, having discussions, how much progress we have made, and stuff. But while the policy thing happens by government representatives, there was also government engagement in 2 spaces. It's called SBI and SAPSTA. So they basically, we have, like in India, we have laws, but implementation is done by different people. The laws are created by our politicians in the legislature and the parliament, right? But people who implement are IAS officers, IPS officers, and stuff. So similarly, we have a body that is set up that evaluates and looks into the implementations of the decisions that is made. So that you have is the subsidiary body for implementation. And then SAPSTA is basically, climate change is not a policy issue. So what happened is, even before 1992, policymakers never thought climate change is something they should create a policy on. It was actually scientists who pushed for this, and you all must have heard of IPCC. It's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's like the highest scientific body that gives advice on climate-related science itself. That was actually established even before UNFCCC. This was in 1998 with a combination of World Meteorological Organization and UNEP, which is the United Nations Environment Program. They came together and set up IPCC. Scientists thought, okay, climate change cannot be addressed by scientists alone, science alone. We need policies to handle this issue. That is when it shifted from being a purely science issue to UNFCCC being drafted, and now policy conversations started happening since 1994. So do we still need, how do we decide that we have to keep warming up to 1.5 degrees and at most 2 degrees? This is given in, you all might have heard of Paris Agreement. It's another, policy document that came out of COP21. So these numbers, these scientific data that informs policy usually is considered and discussed under, we need science. We can't have policies that are not backed by science or evidence, right? So the SAPSTA is the place where all these discussions happen. And then SAPSTA gives the information and conversations back to the Conference of Parties, where it ultimately shapes as policies. And then we have like small ad hoc working groups created in terms of looking at interactions of climate change with various other issues. It could be climate, oceans, it could be mountains, it could be related to finance, it could be related. So climate is not an issue that you can deal with in silos. We have to look at it and from an interdisciplinary nature. So ad hoc working groups are also created, but all of them contribute to Conference of Parties. So Conference of Parties is like the highest decision-making body that meets every year and makes decision under the UNFCCC. So who helps these conferences happen is the UNFCCC Secretariat. So when you say people are working for UNFCCC, they look at like supporting all these activities under the UN itself. They are UN employees. They're basically performing the role of administration and organizing these conferences for the governments to come together and make these decisions. So where do we play a role? If you're not a government official, if you're not part of the UN, we are usually what we call the observers, which means we can't decide because we are not representing governments. But what we can do is observe how these decisions are being made. And then what role we can play is with our expertise, we can play the role of consultants. And we are also having the ability to speak to governments, engage with governments, either through bilaterals or any other modes where we can influence or lobby for what we think is right. Because a lot of governments don't, we have human rights issues, and climate change is also a human rights issue. People are losing, your right to food is impacted if there's an extreme weather event, your right to water is impacted, or you lose your housing, or you lose a job if you're a fisherman and then you can't fish anymore because of a disaster and you have to move to the city. Your livelihood is impacted. Essential rights to you as a human being, so human rights. And sometimes governments don't have the expertise or the understanding to look at these issues. So what observers can do is influence and get the governments to think about what is really important for the society at large, and the issues for them to be considered at the international policy making. So we have a very important role to play. We don't have the power, but we have the ability and the platform to influence the decisions that are making. That is why a lot of people who are not government officials, basically the civil society, attending these conferences to ensure that the decisions that are made by these governments are catering to the most vulnerable and marginalized communities as well. And it is not, restricted to the people of privilege. So this is like basically the structure on how UNFCCC functions, and you all probably now understand what or where your role comes in. And within observers itself, we have it's structured this way. And for us as young people, we usually engage through Youngo, which is the Children Youth Constituency, youth NGOs. But these are all other funny names. We have Bingo, which is business industry. We have Engo, which is environmental NGOs. Then we have a farmers constituency. Like this, we have 9. We have indigenous peoples, local governments, Ringo's research and independent NGOs. This also includes universities, basically. Then you have trade unions, and then we have women and gender as well. So as a young person, you can actually fit into any of these along with, being a part of Youngo. So these are, when I say observers, how do you engage? These are the platforms that are created for you to engage itself. So you can associate yourself with any of these civil society constituencies that you feel more close to in terms of your personal representation. If you feel like you want to work with young people and ensure that young people are getting more platforms, Youngo is the way to go about it. But as a female, or even a male, if you feel like women's issues are more crucial to you, women and gender constituency is the best way to approach it. Or if you think we need to look at scientific data and research, and I'm a researcher, so I want to engage and contribute to this conference through my research and advocate for my research to be recognized, Ringo is the way. So every constituency is representing a specific set of stakeholders, and who you associate with the most, you can do it. But I've performed the role of being a focal point of Youngo when for COP28, which happened in Dubai. So that was then the UAE presidency itself. So we played the role of working with the UNFCCC Secretariat and the UAE Presidency, where we created opportunities for young people to be at COP and also be able to share their thoughts, views about the decisions that are also taking place at COP. If you also like into agriculture and your specialization is agriculture, you can be a part of Youngo, but you can also engage through the farmers constituency itself. And when I said working groups, right, so there are different sub thematics as conversations that happen. Like, for example, in agriculture, we have Corinivia Joint Work Program on Agriculture. So if your expertise is agriculture, you can follow those negotiations and contribute your expertise into those negotiations as well. And so this is like the opportunities you get. I'm just like showing you a couple of pictures where once you make it to the conference itself, you're given an opportunity to share your thoughts, meet government representatives. It does not have to be just Indian representatives. You get to meet government officials from across the world. And then you also get to meet young people who are working just like you on climate change across the world itself. Like the photo on the bottom right is actually a bilateral with the European Union. So we had like at least 10 European country representatives sitting on the other side. And we had, 25 young people sitting on another side. And we were speaking to them about, what as young people we think is important to be recognized in policies when they're negotiating. So when we have these bilaterals, we communicate what we think is important, and many a times if we lobby well enough and influence them well enough, these government representatives, when they go back to negotiations, they will actually consider our views when they speak about it. And that is how, if you all have heard about something called the Loss and Damage Fund. So it took 13 years to set up this fund. But it was because of a few small island developing nations and least developed countries coming together along with the civil society to push for difficult decisions to be made. Because if you just leave it to the governments, it's not always like you won't get ambitious decisions. Everybody will compromise. And, we always think about how sometimes laws and policies are not good enough to cater to the issues that we are facing. So similarly, it'll happen in international policies. And that is why, as observers, we have a huge role to play in influencing and lobbying for higher quality policies with higher standards to be set up and better decisions to be made itself. So another thing, what you need to know is something about UN spaces is that you don't, just because you get access or you get to go to the conference, not every place is actually accessible to you. Because as observers, I'm just showing this to you. If on the left you all see about the blue zone, I'll get to the part where we're speaking about access and how do you get these badges and stuff. So we have something called the blue zone and the green zone. Green zone is usually set up by the government that is hosting the COP. Blue zone is a UN space, and to get access to the UN space, you need badges, and we are usually going in as observers. So when it comes to, these parts like negotiation rooms, the countries will decide whether or not observers will be allowed into a room, which means there are times when it is closed door meetings and you have no access to what is happening or the discussions happening. But there are other event places. So if you see a lot of people speaking on LinkedIn about them being at COP and speaking at an event or meeting somebody, all of these are actually happening outside the negotiations. In negotiation rooms, media is also not allowed, which means you rarely are able to get footage or videos of what is happening in negotiations. Observers might be allowed, but media is an absolute no-go into negotiation rooms. And stuff. So you will need badges through a registered organization to UNFCCC. But Green Zone, on the other hand, anybody, like, as long, anybody can enter into those spaces and stuff. So I just wanted to try and answer, what these conferences mean and how to get access to these conferences. Like I said, I'll quickly share this tab. Are you all able to see my change tab by any chance? Can I get a thumbs up from anybody?
We can see it, yeah.
Okay, great. So when I say we are all observers and engaging, I'm happy to share this link on the chat as well. And Vishal can share it. So how do you get access? It is only through an registered observer organization to the UNFCCC. This is a process. So if you all have NGOs itself, technically you have to be a registered organization. Like, you have to have a legal form, and then you make an application to the UNFCCC, and they will conduct due diligence and stuff. They will require some documents, and once you're registered, you have a lifetime registry, access to the thing. So the word we call is accreditation. So here all the observer organizations are accredited, and then each organization will have representatives. So ENACT is not yet registered to UNFCCC, but in case ENACT is accredited, then I will act as a representative of ENACT at UNFCCC when I go there. So there are three kinds. Like I said, here they're speaking about three categories of participants, right? Parties to the convention and observer states. These are basically the government representatives I was speaking about. And then we have members of press and media, which is another set of people. And the third one is representative of observer organizations. So observer organizations can be three times. And most of the time when you will be engaging with is through non-governmental organizations, unless you're like an employee of a big international organization or the UN. So UN also sends representatives, but even UN employees go in there as observers. They're not into making decisions, or they don't have any power to make decisions there. And intergovernmental organization and international organization are also like, you have the Red Cross, you have IUCN, you have IPCC. So these are all like international intergovernmental organizations that are set up. So they can also send in representatives, and non-governmental are basically our NGOs and stuff. So here you can actually find a list of organizations who are accredited. And when I spoke about the constituencies, you can do it. You have all the information on the UNFCCC website that is given on how to engage at these conferences. And right now, I'll maybe show this to you guys. So the demand for especially UNFCCC COPs have like skyrocketed because of the number of people working on climate change itself. And once you affiliate yourself with an observer organization, you can get registration, and then you can basically attend UNFCCC COP itself. Let me just quickly show this to you guys. But feel free to through the link, go to that link and explore what is there, and it'll help you get a lot of information on what you can do, what you can't do, and what kind of engagements you can have at a UNFCCC COP. I think this is a little slow right now. So yeah, either ways. So for your first goal ultimately is basically finding a registered organization. So at one link, I'll try to find that specific list, but the goal is that, once you get the access to that list, you'll find out which country they are from, and how to reach out to them, because there's email given, or you're able to find somebody via LinkedIn. So find the name of an organization. As Indians, it is easier to reach out to an Indian organization, and there are quite a few Indian organizations accredited to the UNFCCC. So find that out and speak to them. And this is also a volunteering opportunity. So if you're able to request an opportunity from these organizations, write an email or write to an employee working with that organization saying that you're interested in attending COP. Would you be able to give me access? And if they say yes, then you can, support the organization's presence at COP and engage with them, and, engage at side events and other spaces on behalf of the organization itself. And then in terms of fundraising, it is not always easy to raise funds. Not everybody has the money to go to a UN conference, be it your flight tickets, your accommodation, or having money for your food on a daily basis and stuff. And especially when the conference is happening, that accommodation in those cities become really expensive because there's so much demand. And UNFCCC conferences at the minimum have 40 to 50,000 people flocking into that city for that 2 weeks itself. So it is very, very important that you try your best to fundraise. And what you can do for fundraising, obviously, one is, it is great if the organization giving you accreditation is also, able to support you with funding. But otherwise, you can also reach out to UN agencies. There are a lot of UN agencies, right from UNICEF to UNESCO to UNDP, UNFPA. All these UN agencies actually want to support youth engagement and youth presence at conferences like these. So, but please remember, these are all conversations that should start happening many, many months before the conference is happening. So, I mean, if you're, it would be great even if you start speaking to NGOs right now for the COP that is going to happen in November this year in Turkey. So you start your conversations, you find an NGO to, who'd be willing to give you access to the conference, but you also start writing to from the UN. And LinkedIn is such a great place to find these contacts for who is working. Even if they might not, be able to help you, please always at the end ask them saying that if you're unable to help me, please, can you please direct me to somebody who's working on these conferences and stuff. And sometimes it's not always that you'll be successful, but you got to keep trying with UN agencies. And there are other initiatives that make an open application call as well for you to be able to, apply and receive funding. This is where your work in India also becomes very important, because it's not that you're only focused on getting to the main conference, but you have to also be a person who's working in India on climate change. And that increases your chances. And this gives you a platform to showcase your work that you're doing in India. It could be, working on adaptive measures, supporting communities, for, like, helping them with adaptation. If you're working with women farmers, or if you're working with tribal students, or indigenous peoples, or if you're somebody who's educating your community on climate change and how it is impacting them. So doing groundwork is just as important as you trying to get an opportunity internationally, because that is what makes the international opportunity more impactful, because you're able to showcase the work that you're doing at the international level. And when people are willing to fund you, they fund you because of the value that you contribute to this. Ultimately, it also becomes a volunteering opportunity, in terms of you having to volunteer to represent the organization and do what is required to support the organization's presence at the international conference itself. So please start, if you want to go attend the COP this year in Turkey. Right now, this is when you start research and start talking to people and start engaging, and also continue doing your work within India, because that should never stop, because ultimately it's about implementation itself, right? We don't want people who are only about speaking at places. We also want people looking at how we truly empower and support communities when it comes to climate change. So please keep that in mind, and people who are willing to fund will always be more than happy to support you, as long as you're doing good work on the ground. I am conscious of time. I think I'll just take another 5 to 6 minutes. In terms of how can Indian youth engage, one of the ways that we did was the local conference of youth, where we have, as an act, we did 2 events in 2022 and 24, where we brought in young people together, and then we basically came up with national youth statements. So that's when I started. I also told this, like, as young people, we have the knowledge, we have the voice, but we don't have platforms to showcase it. ELCO is one of those platforms where you can come in and speak about what you have to say about the issues that your community face, or you face personally, and what you're interested in. And, climate is such an interdisciplinary issue. You could speak about climate migrants, you could speak about biodiversity, you could speak about, as an engineer, you could speak about the technical knowledge in making that transition to renewable energy itself. So there are so many intersectionalities, and the National Youth Statement has thematics. You could even be working on water and sanitation issues in the context of climate, or health, mental health and physical health issues. So I'm just giving an example of, some text we had about how climate change, how young people, proposals we had come up with. How do we strengthen youth engagement for biodiversity conservation? In India, we have something called People's Biodiversity Register. This is under the Biodiversity Act. So very local committees are set up. So young people can actually look at, recording all these biodiversities within their communities. And this is such a great volunteering opportunity for you to have. If there's no biodiversity management committee, you can speak to your local authorities and ensure that it's set up, because India has so much biodiversity, but we don't have documentation of it. And People's Biodiversity Register is exactly that activity, and it's literally under the law, but there's very less implementation of it. There's so many panchayats and villages that don't have these registers. So you could even take lead in ensuring that these activities happen. Or we are also speaking about our cultural heritage and indigenous knowledge, that is being used even for solutions, or how do you preserve them. So when we speak about climate change, it's not always, the way it's portrayed by the media, that it always happens at the highest level, or it only has to do with less fossil fuels and more renewable energy. But when we speak about adaptation and loss and damage, we're literally working with lives of people and ensuring that people don't go hungry, people have a house, or things like these, which are completely, considered far away from climate change. A lot of biodiversity is being lost because of climate change, and only through a register or documentation can we understand how much biodiversity we are losing. So young people have such a great role to play, and we can also create opportunities for ourselves with the work and the expertise we have, and stuff. So obviously this is just showcasing that once you do these policy related activities, there'd be people who'd be willing to listen to what you have to say. And the national youth statements reached the Ministry of Environment. At COP28, we were able to hand it over to our Minister for Environment, Bhupendra Yadav. For ELCOI 2024, we were able to hand over the statement to an officer of Mary Life itself, and they were very happy about how creative we were in terms of what role youth can play, and stuff, and they were more than willing to engage. And this was supported by UNICEF for us in terms of this handover, because UNICEF regularly works with UNICEF UA team, basically, to be very, very specific. They're mandated to work with young people, so they created these platforms for us to be able to take young people's voices to government officials who are in charge of making decisions at the Indian level. And it is these people who actually go back to COP and stuff. And, internationally also, when you go to these conferences, you can meet Indian delegations and Indian officials itself. And apart from Indian delegation, like I said, on the left, I was moderating a panel. The person speaking on the screen is actually Minister for Youth and Sports in Egypt. The lady with the pink blazer is Minister of Environment from Egypt. So when you engage in these spaces, you also get to meet and speak to ministers from other governments. And on the left, we were meeting the head of UNICEF, Miss Kitty, and then, top right, it's the UN Secretary General. He's somebody with the highest position in the UN. He's the boss of UN. But I didn't have to have a UN job or to be a government official to meet him or engage with him. That was us handing over the Global Youth Statement. So what India had was the National Youth Statement. When I was the focal point, we worked on the Global Youth Statement, which represented voices of youth across over 110 countries and stuff. And we were able to give it to him, saying that this is what young people want in terms of policy. And the person below, standing in between, he's actually the Additional Secretary General. UN actually now recognize the value of young people, and there's a youth office established under the UN, and he's the first person to hold the position of an assistant secretary. He's also like 33 years old when he got appointed, and stuff. So what I'm trying to say, at least with these pictures, is that, your volunteering and the work that you're doing can take you to places, as long as you're able to curate and engage with the right set of people. And I've already told you, the moment you get into the space and at the conference, it is a completely different world altogether, and you have a voice and you can use it for the better good, because ultimately all the decisions that are taken at these places are impacting the lives of people, that or including your own life. So your goal must be to ensure that you're representing those voices very responsibly and stuff. These were other regional engagements that I had. I was in Malaysia, where there was an Asia Pacific Climate Week. This year it is happening in April in Korea. And I was also in Germany with two co-presidents itself. So when you're able to leverage your grassroots and ground level work, and you're able to use that experience and knowledge in platforms like these, you're able to, you're actually doing a service where you're representing communities and people with no privilege to come to these spaces and stuff. So one last thing I want to share is, where can you volunteer in India? I mean, if you're all on social media, I'm sure you'll find a list of so many, youth-led organizations itself. And if you feel like people, there's Indian Youth for Climate, then you have Bring Back Green Foundation, who also co-hosted local conference of youth with us. Even Prasad, we're all volunteering here. There's so many opportunities, and sometimes you feel like maybe you don't fit in, and it is absolutely okay to start your own initiative as well and bring a group of people together and stuff. And what you need to do is ensure that the work that you're doing is equally impactful, like it is with a sense of purpose as well. There's also initiatives like There Is No Planet B. You also have the Fridays for Future movement. So there is no dearth of movements, communities which you can join and actively support. And you can also be able to, and it is not always that you have to actively do something very technical in nature to volunteer, but volunteering does not always mean doing admin work as well. So when it comes to volunteering in the climate space, see how you can use your personal skills for the cause or for the work that you're doing. If you're great at social media, or if you're great at public speaking, support an organization where they need more public, because there are a lot of organizations, where people need active social media support because they're just so busy doing the work on ground that they don't have social media presence. If you're good at social media, go do that. That is also a great volunteering job, because you're making more and more people aware about the issue, more people aware about the work that the organization is doing and stuff. So when I say what other opportunities exist, so you don't have to always think volunteering is just about cleanup drives and planting trees, but you can also find other creative ways to work. And even if you're a master's student with great research skills, start writing blogs for organizations. They'd appreciate it so much. Or you're able to conduct research and provide research support to organizations with their work and stuff. So for me, volunteering is about leveraging the skills that you're good at and doing a good job of what you're able to do itself. So it's like giving a new perspective and adding value from your expertise itself. I personally think a lot of young people are experts. It's only that we are unable to leverage our expertise when things are actually being implemented, and we have to, and sometimes because of how the system is built, we have to fight a little. So it's not like opportunities fell on my feet. I've had to reach out to people, speak to people, engage with them, and ensure that platforms are created not just for me but for the other young people to be able to engage and stuff. But always keep this in mind that we do volunteering is, at least to me, is how best you can leverage what you're good at and actually be able to contribute very meaningfully and impactfully. And I want to leave one last thing with like a disclaimer of sorts. Sorry, let me just reload this. I think I have one last slide. Yeah. So this, I really want you all to understand two things in terms of tokenism and meaningful participation. You all must have heard of greenwashing. So similarly with youth, it's called youth washing. There are instances, there are situations where young people are exploited and abused, and especially in the name of volunteering itself. And people, it is great that you're able to convey gratitude, give certificates, and a lot of other things. But there are organizations that also exploit young people's, lack of opportunities and stuff. And they say that a lot of organizations that engage with young people, just on a tokenistic level, like they want to do it because they want to look good in their PR and stuff. So you always have to ensure that nobody is using you or exploiting you, and be conscious of it. And it is okay for you to say no to activities that you don't feel comfortable doing. And there are times in the name of volunteering, organizations expect you to do a full-time job because organizations aren't able to pay salaries and stuff. But I think as young people, we also need to learn how to engage with respect and dignity, and that is for your self-respect and your dignity. So ensure that whether it's with you or it's with the people around you, that there is no tokenism or youth washing that is happening, because there are it is a sad thing, it is a very unfortunate thing. But whatever your engagement is and your participation is, it must be meaningful in nature. And that is why I always focus on leveraging what you're good at to be able to help others. But don't make sure that, be it with you or others, nobody's exploiting your contributions and taking credit for your work and stuff. And the last part is understanding your role and responsibility. And this, for me, I take most of the work that I do, I don't get paid. So this is like completely on as a volunteer that I do a lot of these policy related work. But it also comes with a great deal of responsibility. So how you act also becomes very important. Say the moment I go to an international conference, firstly, I'm representing India, and secondly, I'm also representing Indian youth. So how people perceive Indian youth will also be because of how I behave at international conferences. So it brings in a lot of responsibility, and it's also privilege, right? There are like millions of young Indian people who cannot be at these places, and they're literally people who are victims of climate change, and their voices need to be heard. So some people unfortunately take this roles and opportunities very lightly, and I hope you do not when you get these opportunities, because it is a matter of great privilege to be there. And you have to ensure that when you are communicating, especially publicly or through social media or through LinkedIn, the words that you have to be very careful with your choice of words, what you're aligning with, and ensuring that the role that you're playing makes others recognize and respect you for the positions you hold as well, because you're not just representing yourself in international spaces, but you're representing millions of other young people who cannot be there. So please keep that in mind before you engage, or it does not have to be restricted to international, but even if you're going out of your state or your city, I think the moment you go out, you're acting as this representative, and it is very important that you take that privilege and role very seriously, because it is a matter of privilege to be there when others are not getting access to opportunities like these. And I will stop there. I am sorry about taking up the time, but I'm happy to take up any questions there might be.
Thank you so much, Hema. And of course, it was not just insightful, but also we got a glimpse of the NGOs that are working and how we can engage through Pratha as collaborative partners, as well as through state officials and volunteers to work with other multiple NGOs as well to get far more opportunities parallelly in the climate space. Looking forward to any questions that anybody would like to ask. Yes, Ruti.
Hi, Ram. As you mentioned that we can contribute in the register, but I think that is the work of administration, local administration only. So how can we contribute in that process and not interfering with the interest of the local administration?
Okay, so when it comes to the People's Biodiversity Register, there is the local administration is many a times also do not have technical expertise to do this job. I know, so I was also professor at Terry, and I have students who have actively engaged and done this for like in I think this is in the UP, in and around Ghaziabad. So they were able to um, so it's a matter of creating opportunities. So go back to your local administration and then speak to them and ask them for the status of the register. And then because if you're like a student studying biodiversity, you are given opportunities to go on field trips and stuff, and you do recognize it. You check for whether your register is even updated, and then you go back. And this is where you're creating an opportunity for yourself. It's not under law, but local administration definitely, a lot of places they need help, because they also many times don't have the capacity or the technical knowledge to do this. So when you go speak to them, they're, from what I've heard, at least with like 5 or 6 people who have done this across various parts of India, the administration was more than welcoming to get the support to, update the register and stuff. So I think it starts off with how receptive your local administration is. And once you start a conversation, I think it will, take some shape, and you'll be able to make that happen.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stuti. And anybody else? Ibtisam, would you like to ask any question?
No, Vishal, it's quite clear actually. I've understood the things. Just trying to analyze and study the matter more. It's all clear so far.
Thank you so much. And anybody else who would like to ask any question? And we have Hina also. Hina, can you hear me? Am I audible to you?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Hi,
So,
hi,
yes.
Dr.
So,
Hema. I'm so happy
Hina,
to say. Yeah.
okay. So Hina is with us, and she is although a little system to me, but she is also an inspiration not just in India but for women across the world. And we all know Hina for doing inspiring activities and being uh, the one of the selected UNICEF youth representative from India. So yes, Hina, would you like to ask anything in regards to your activities so far?
Thank you so much, Vishal. And thank you so much, Dr. Hema. I'm so much happy to say Dr. Hema. Uh, um, I know already Hema because I spent time with her during COP29, and today I learned a lot of things that I didn't know before because I went COP. That time I didn't know what have to do there and what not. But today I learned a lot of things, and next what we have to do, I will also happy to know more about when we participate in COP and what we have to do, what is process uh, after going there. So I will happy to know, and because after coming from COP29, I did research and about COP, and sorry, I'm trying to speak in English, but it's okay. हाँ, तो थोड़ा सा मुझे मतलब
हीना
वहाँ पे जाने के
में बोल सकते हो।
ओके, बट वहाँ पे थोड़ा-सा जाने के बाद वहाँ के जो साइड इवेंट्स होते हैं, वहाँ के बैजेज़ के बारे में वहाँ का पूरा जो प्रोसेस है ना, उसको बहुत डीपली से और जानना है मुझे। या
Okay, thank you so much. And anybody else who would like to add up more?
या बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिला। मैं उस पे काम करूँगी थोड़ा-सा, क्योंकि वो सारी चीज़ें जो आज जानी है, क्या हमें करना है और कैसे हमें मतलब इंटरनेशनल जो कॉन्फ्रेंसेस होती हैं, उनमें कैसे पार्टिसिपेट कर सकते हैं, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का क्या रोल होता है, वो सारी चीज़ें सीखी हैं, बट उन पे थोड़ा काम करेंगे। बट हाँ, थोड़ा-सा वहाँ पे जाने के बाद क्या प्रोसेस होता है, दैट वो जानना चाहती हूँ।
For sure. Thank you, हीना। किसी और को कुछ पूछना है? Jill, Shubhalakshmi, Shraddha, anybody else?
Hello, Dr. Hema. Good evening. I'm a teacher by profession, so I totally understood what you told us. It was very detailed, but I'm a teacher by profession, so my major stakeholders are the students. So if I ever have to bring these young children who are in grade 8 or 9 or 10, if I have to bring them to this active volunteerism, how do you would you like to guide me in shaping their thoughts and bringing them to this to take up volunteering work willingly, so is there anything to motivate them? Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll give you some context in terms of my work only, and we've been trying to see, like I started off, right? Climate change impacts everybody, but you'll not see everybody working on climate change. So I think what you need to do is maybe sit down and create a space where these young kids are able to speak about how they feel about environmental issues, or what is important to them. Like recently, I was in Jharkhand, and there's this event called Dhwani that happens, organized by Tata Steel Foundation. Okay, and these are like extremely rural kids that are like that the Tata Steel Foundation engages with, and people end up volunteering for things, and that's an understanding I had. Like, not everybody has to volunteer on climate. There's so many issues in the world that you can like literally work on. But what keeps people going in terms of volunteering is what matters to them the most. So what I saw across when I did meet those kids from these areas, like there are these amazing girls who have like stopped child marriages because that's an issue they deal with. Like, these are all kids from Jharkhand and Odisha and stuff where child marriage is very, very prominent. And I saw another girl, like she broke down, but the issue she was grappling with was drinking issues in rural areas, and also there's something that she had to deal with a family member, and her volunteering and work involved, the shop that sells alcohol, also like checks in and limits who is getting or who's buying so many drinks all the time and everything else. So I think you start off, and these people are doing not because they get money, they get any international opportunities, no, just because they believe in the cause. Stopping child marriage is a huge thing, but then their ability to work on something that brings them gives them a sense of purpose, and there's no incentive per se apart from helping somebody else, right? And that is also the purpose of volunteering. You need to help them discover that within themselves. The moment they discover their sense of purpose, I don't think there is anything that would stop them from working on it. And this could even come down to like plastic pollution or caring about something else, but that discovery becomes very, very important. Otherwise, young people also tend to get a little distracted with the trends that are happening. And I know a lot of, this is unfortunate, but I know a lot of people who end up working on climate change because it's more trendier than biodiversity or plastic issues at the moment. So help them find what drives them internally, and I think that is a great way to start and get them thinking and volunteering.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And so we have 15 minutes more. So will Jit, Vandana?
Yeah, Vishal, I do have one question. Hello, ma'am. So, ma'am, my question to you is, firstly, it's so inspiring to see you and your organization working for climate change. Also, as an insider and as a participant, what do you think is the relevance of international organizations like UNFCCC currently, when the major superpowers, so-called US, themselves are withdrawing? And how is that impacting this international organization, especially in terms of fund? And how is that indirectly impacting the volunteerism as a system?
I wouldn't say there is a direct cause and effect relationship, because, there's so many layers in between and stuff. But see, it is definitely a blow with the US withdrawing, but I still remember I was part of a negotiations training with like a lot of people from South Asia, and this minister from Bhutan, he was like, so when US comes to the negotiations, right, they're usually, so UNFCCC works on consensus process. So everybody has to agree to the policy, whatever decisions they're taking. Even if one country says no, the decision does not go through. And US, there are some problematic countries in international negotiations, and one of them was like US, which slows down the negotiations. When I spoke about the loss and damage fund also, it took 13 years simply because there were countries that were blocking the setting up of the fund. So he asked me to look at it very differently. It's like, why is it in your control that, can you do something about US backing off? No. Then let's start focusing our energies on how you can look at the situation positively, which means he said the international cooperation will be better because you don't have US blocking all the decisions. So we can make more ambitious decisions under UNFCCC in the absence of US. I mean, US will still influence it and engage some way or the other. The politics, the geopolitics will always be around. But from him, I think this was a conversation I had last May. It's about how can you look at the situation more optimistically and stuff. And I don't think it directly impacts the ground level work that you're doing. Like, whether it comes to funding and stuff, like as an act, we haven't stopped working on anything we want to work on. Whether or not there is support internationally or whatever conversation, and sometimes it's there is a gap there in terms of what happens on ground and what is done internationally or the decision taken up internationally. The best way to handle these situations, especially on a daily basis, you constantly get like very negative news around climate and stuff, is to see that you are doing the best of what you can do and you're happy with the work that you're doing. Do what is within your control. What is not within your control, especially as a volunteer, you can't influence government decisions. You can't go tell the Indian government what positions they are supposed to take. The same with any other government, right? So I think trying to focus on what is within your control and doing a good job of whatever you're doing is the best way to handle how you feel about the international situation. It can be frustrating, but doing the good work you're doing probably gives you more optimism and hope itself.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Okay, Stuti, would you like to say anything?
Sorry for interrupting, but I had last question, ma'am. Adding on to my previous question. So, ma'am, basically, I'm from Bundelkhand, UP area, and you must have heard that it is a drought-prone area and geographically very sensitive. And I'm someone who is interested in women's empowerment, and what I have observed that women are not getting opportunities, and they are not able to come to the national development agenda because of the climate change. And yeah, ma'am, I would like to know your opinion that how I can contribute in that regard.
Okay. Maybe I'll give you 2 examples of how to do this. Like, your work could be something as simple as, you meet 10 other girls at a park who want to sit down and have a conversation. It does not have to be an intellectual conversation also. You create a safe space for other girls to share their frustrations and how they're not being heard. It's that simple. That's where you start. The moment, see, we can only think about solutions provided you identify the problem, right? Now you've identified the problem being, women from your community or place where you come from are not getting opportunities nationally. But you have to try and identify what is the reason or the cause behind it. Is it because the society and within your community does not respect women enough? Are women's opinions even considered in any process? Does it even matter? And are women even allowed to travel? Like when we had to do Alcoy, right? There were a lot of young girls who were not allowed to come to Mysore, and they were like, we will only send it if you're able to fund. This is like a 33-year-old female, okay? And she was not allowed to travel to Alcoy despite getting selected as a delegate, because they said, I will only be able to send her if her husband comes along for this conference and stuff. So there are like these vices in the society on how women are treated, and there are a lot of issues with that women have to additionally handle compared to men. So I think my recommendation, if there is that you start off with like bringing girls together and seeing why do you think this is happening with your communities and stuff. And then if you have the privilege, please go on LinkedIn, find somebody working with UN Women and engaging with them, just to send them a message and saying, this is something we want to work on in my community. Can you help me find the right people to get the support that I want to do? Because when we speak about gender and climate change, the typical example people give is in terms of water scarcity. And when you say drought prone area, it's the women that bring in water to their houses, right? So if water becomes scarce, they are the people who have to travel 10 additional kilometers to get water, fetch water back to their houses. Nobody's going to help them. So this is creating this very huge imbalance in terms of responsibilities for home to run a house. Even like as an act, we are starting a project in Maharashtra where during heat waves everybody says stay at home, stay at home, stay at home. But then what if your home is more hotter than the outside? You need to stay healthy, and we will be working with women farmers and just women in general, and retrofitting their house tops so that when they're home working in front of fire and cooking for their families, they don't get a heat stroke and die, because there have been instances of women dying because of these things, and the policies don't think about it. So you can the best way you can do as a volunteer is start off a conversation and bring this conversation to the attention of somebody in the UN or an agency that is working with women and supporting women's empowerment. I
Thank
hope
you
that
so
helps.
much. Yeah, ma'am, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hema. And in case anybody would like to ask or have any more queries, can of course DM me and we'll let Hema know about it. As well as, I will share the LinkedIn ID of Hema for everyone to follow and connect. And again, thank you so much, Hema, for joining us and interacting with us, sharing your insights, your experiences. And anyways, being a friend as well as, knowing you since a long time, every time we meet, every time we discuss, it's a great experience to talk to you about. Thank you so much.